Waxers, and welcome to Waxing Lyrical with Mains and Dutch. I'm your host Mains, and my colleague who thinks every film that James Cameron does has to involve a blue character is Mr. Neil Dutton. How are we, Neil?
All I'm saying is, Avatar, full of blue people. Titanic, full of blue people. It's just this guy's shtick. It's just what he wants to do.
It's like George Lucas can't now do a film which hasn't got some kind of alien or spaceship in it.
Well, to be fair, have you seen Howard the Duck?
Yeah, but...
Stick to what you got at, George. Steve Coogan knows, stick what you got at. Partridge is your boy now. Don't do anything else, except unless it's another series of The Trip.
Sometimes I like that sometimes people try and get out of the zone, but it doesn't usually work. Do you know what I mean? So just stick to what you're good at, like as you quite rightly point out. It'll
still pay the bills.
At the end of the day, I hate Mr. Bean, but Rowan Atkinson knows that as you said, as you quite rightly point out, pays bills. So get it sorted. Dutton, big, heavy NFL show this week. We have the man of many media NFL hats, Mr. Ross Tucker, speaking to you, as I believe he's not allowed to speak to me due to some restraining order or whatever. And then we have also the brilliant Matt Waldman from the Rookie Scouting Portfolio, who's going to give us his views on all things draft. And obviously we'll get them both to talk about the trade, which we will also talk about later. Mm-hmm. We have Weird World, of course, as always. But the first things first, Dutton, somber start to the show. Obviously we are massive sports fans, and one of our favourite sports is cricket. If it's not yours, well, that's not my problem. What we want to talk about is James Taylor, not the singer, the cricketer.
Although this week has shown that he does have a friend.
Boo to you. He was diagnosed this week, Dutton. I'm going to see if I can remember. Is it AVRT? Is it? Is that right?
Something like that.
Is that right? Something like that. Which is the same condition that affected Fabrice Muamba. He took ill during a pre-season game, I believe, and
just before the game, yeah.
And they went for some tests, and obviously was told he has this, which means he cannot play cricket anymore, and at 26 has had to retire from international and any form of cricket. You know more about cricket than me, Dutton, so I will let you take the floor to give us some thoughts on the situation.
It was ARVC, which was arrhythmogenic right ventricular arrhythmia.
There we go.
Taylor obviously he's noticeable because of how small he is.
The irony of you saying he's noticeable when he's 4'2" is not lost on me.
Yeah, and he looks like a mini Manilow. Yeah, he's been around. He seems to have been around forever, even though he's only 26. He's been prolific in county cricket. He made his Test debut in 2012 and was famously the owner of the worst innings I've ever seen, allegedly said by Kevin Peterson. He only played one more Test after that, and then he vanished pretty much from the scene altogether. It was quite weird, but he fought his way back in through One Day Cricket 2020 and got back into the Test team. He was part of the party in South Africa, and his average of 53.11 is the fourth highest limited overs average in history. Speaking to friends of ours, Paul Nixon and Charles Dagnall, they're both former teammates, or they've been involved with clubs that Taylor's been at. Obviously passed on as many best wishes as they can, but they both said he's absolutely devastated. I mean, it's just scary. He was close to dying. That's how this is. I mean, Fabrice Muamba was lucky. There's defibrillators at football grounds. There isn't at cricket grounds. So you dread to, shudder to think what could have happened if this hadn't been diagnosed. So he will be a sad loss to cricket because he was just a lovely player to watch, and by all accounts, I'd say from all the tributes that have been paid, just a bloody nice lad.
Do you think that defibrillator thing, I can never say.
Defibrillator.
Thank you. will change, that they will then put now, due to this, which didn't actually happen but could quite well have happened in a county match, in a test match, a one-day T20, because much like Fabrice Muamba, there's no kind of know what it's going to happen. And the irony of this is that the fitter you are, the more likely it is to happen. Do you think that the cricket will look at this and maybe get some plans in place for it?
I would hope so, because it's, as you say, this isn't people like my age, 35, overweight, do very little exercise. It's not all collapsing ill. These are fit young men, at the height of their powers. So if it can happen to them, it can happen to anyone. So I would hope, that certainly, at the main grounds, it should be had. I mean, you have defibs in schools now. They're all, I would hope, football clubs. I don't see any reason why they shouldn't be a cricket ground.
For me, I don't either. I mean, I don't know as much about cricket as you. I watch it, but all I know is that all James Taylor ever did in first class was score runs. He had a short spell in the test team that didn't work, and then they seem to think of every single reason on the planet not to pick him again. He seemed, with the one day, he'd finally become part of the team, part of the setup, and was going to go on for a long time, or we hoped. And it is really sad that that's not going to be the case from now on.
Yeah, we're all, I mean, as I say, he'll have his health, and hopefully he'll still have a place in cricket. But in this, we're all losers.
Exactly, Dutton. So Dutton, that was our sombre mood. And before we get on to the NFL and talk to Ross, obviously it's Weird World time, and let's think about stupid things to lighten the mood. The question I have for you, Dutton, is: could you outrun a fart? When a fart detonates, Dutton, you face a difficult race to avoid its impact, according to a new video that was released by the YouTube series ASAP Science on Wednesday.
What does ASP stand for?
As soon as possible, I hope. Escaping the sound is out of the question at 340 metres per second. But according to the new video, the sticky emissions in farts can be quite swift. And we calculate that the smelliest fart travels at 243 metres a second. This isn't Weird World, I just thought it was genius. Because someone's saying how quick a fart goes. I've been, as a man who's slept in the same room for you for a period of time, I know there's no escaping those farts.
Not in the biblical sense. As a wise man once said, farts only smell because they go past crap.
Who said that?
The Kiwi.
Okay, fair enough.
And I like to think of that as a metaphor for people who fall into bad company. They're good people, but if you hang around with bad people, you're going to get tarred with the same brush. Farts are completely smellless, but they go past crap, pick up some of the particles, and then they stink.
Okay, I like that, Dutton. I like that. My favourite story of the week, though, Dutton. You ever watch Prison Break?
No.
You have watched Shawshank Redemption, though?
I have.
I'm going to tell you an escape story right now, but it has an unlikely star, and that's.
Do we need the Great Escape music to be playing while this?
Possibly that may have to come in post production, and that is the unlikely star is the octopus from the New Zealand aquarium, Inky.
An imaginative name.
Yeah, it must have took them a good 30 seconds to come up with that one. The 8-armed wonder noticed that the lid to his enclosure at the National Aquarium of New Zealand was left slightly open after some maintenance work. So after hours, Inky slipped out, leaped onto the floor, crawled to a drain pipe and disappeared into the ocean. It gets better done. According to stuff.co.nz, again, I thought we were the only ones who come up with original ends of our email addresses, internet addresses. Inky left behind octopus tracks, which exposed its escape route. The Guardian posted a sequence of images showing how he broke out. The pipe was just 6 inches in diameter, but aquarium manager Rob Yarrell told Radio New Zealand that octopuses are flexible enough to squeeze through such tight confines.
Inky the squid, a man who crawled through 500 yards, came out fresh as a daisy on the other side.
I just love the fact that, like, he's just, like, have you ever seen Finding Nemo? This is Finding Nemo, right? This is the story that every night he talks to all the other animals in the aquarium about how they're going to escape and all the plans related as such. They finally get that plan in place. That they managed to trick someone to leave it open, and off he went. And there he is, straight to freedom now.
I'm just wondering, octopus have got 8 legs.
8 legs they've got on, yeah.
So, which 8 legs? Which leg did he hold and throw the ball against the wall and catch? Did he catch it with another arm, or I mean, I'm assuming that this is an aquatic version of the Great Escape, as we say. So,
well, it's either a Great Escape or they actually didn't leave his tank open. What actually happened was he cut a hole in it, digging it with a spoon, and covered it with a poster of a fit octopus.
Yeah, I can believe that. I mean, it's either that, because I just think an octopus would look stupid on a motorbike trying to jump over a fence to get into Switzerland.
That's why I think that the Shawshank Redemption story is probably a little bit more likely, as it gives that opportunity to not have to ride a motorbike.
Get busy inking, get busy dying.
If you have any weird whale stories, please send them to either myself or Dutton. I am at Mainsy7 and Dutton is at ndutton13. We love sport and talking, but we especially love ridiculousness, and that's why we put Weird Whale in every single week.
I'll promise to you.
Dutton, I'm going to disappear now, as due to legal ramifications, you're going to speak to Mr. Ross Tucker, and for whatever reason, I'm not allowed.
Absolutely.
Or I was still in work when this was recorded. Dutton's going to speak to media savant and then former NFL player Ross Tucker about the trade, about the rookie symposium, and why the offensive line play is so garbage at the moment.
And I also give him a new nickname that he absolutely loved.
Here we are, Mr. Ross Tucker.
Joining us now on the podcast, you know him from the College Draft podcast, Fantasy Feast with Evan Silver, the Even Money podcast, and of course the one that bears his name, RossTucker.com. The Ross Tucker Football podcast. He is the podfather himself, Ross Tucker. Ross, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Did you just call me the Podfather?
I did.
I like that, man. First of all, I really don't think I am that, but it sounds good. Thank you, Neil. Thanks for having me, always.
First question I've got to ask, I suppose, is obviously the news that's happened today is the trade, and the Tennessee Titans trading the first overall pick to the St. Louis Rams. I'd just like to know what are your thoughts on that from both teams' perspective, really?
Well, I'm not that surprised. A little birdie had told me to keep my eye on that as a possibility, and they were right, so I need to give them credit for that. From the Titans' perspective, this makes all the sense in the world. To get an additional second-round pick, an additional third-round pick, a first-round pick next year. I mean, they got a significant haul for that pick. And they already have their quarterback of the future in Marcus Mariota. This enables them to really have a chance to build a pretty good team around him. So this is a no-brainer for them. For the Rams, you really don't do this move unless you're thoroughly convinced that there is a quarterback at the top of the draft that is going to be able to be your franchise guy for 10 years. And obviously, they feel like they've identified that guy. There are some reports it's Jared Goff, some reports it's Carson Wentz. I tend to think it's Carson Wentz, but there's reports of both. But we can talk till the cows come home about how much, they gave up. But nobody really ever cares how much you gave up if the guy becomes a franchise quarterback. That's only a conversation if the guy doesn't. But if the guy doesn't become a franchise quarterback, it's a terrible trade no matter how much they gave up, right? And in terms of the draft compensation they gave up, we have to assume that they had to give up that much in order to get him. Maybe there was another bidder. Maybe there was somebody else. I've seen reports that there was somebody else that wanted the number one pick. So that's what the Rams evidently had to do to be able to secure the guy they wanted.
I mean, the incredibly Jeff Fisher thing to do would be to, sell all this, move up to the first overall, and then take Ezekiel Elliott or Laramie Tunsil anyway. That seems to be what, the ultimate Jeff Fisher Rams thing to do would be, but I can't see that happening myself.
No, they're taking a quarterback. You can put your mortgage up on that, Neil. I promise they're taking a quarterback.
When we speak of the draft, there's as a former offensive lineman, there's an article I read. It was quite interesting. It said it was talking about how much the current CBA has affected drafting of offensive linemen. Obviously, in the last few years, O-linemen who've been taken certainly near the top of the draft have struggled. We're talking about like Eric Fisher and Luke Jokel. Could this be because offensive linemen needs to be a more physical practice regime, and under the current CBA they're not getting that, so they're really not developing as much as they used to?
Well, I think that there's probably some truth to the fact that it would be better for these guys if they were able to have more practice time than they're allowed, and maybe even some more practice time with contact. But there's enough other guys, Neil, whether it's Zach Martin or Joel Bitonio or Jake Matthews or whomever, that are really playing at a high level that seems like more of a cop-out or more of an excuse for me for people, not drafting very good players.
I agree. I mean, obviously, into the full disclosure, I'm an Eagles fan, and obviously from 2013, the Eagles have had Lane Johnson, who's done a good job and has been pretty much inked to be the left tackle of the future. It's just that it used to be seen as if you take an offensive lineman high and early, it's a safe pick. It's not a particularly sexy one. It's not going to get too many people excited, but it's not going to get anyone fired really. And it's probably just the as I say, you're just highlighting the Jokel and the Fishers because they were first and second overall. It might just get that. It might just have a bit more wheels on that argument than if they'd just been second, third rounders.
Yeah, well, so I think that's part of it, but I also think, if you go back and look at Robert Gallery or even way back in Tony Mandarich, I think the safe pick at the top has always been a little bit of a misnomer. There's nothing that's that safe. I think, if anything, with offensive linemen, you can actually protect them and hide them a little bit more with scheme so that if they are a bust or if they aren't a great player, you can soften the blow a little bit by maybe sliding to them or protecting them in certain ways. But you still can't. You can only protect them so much.
Speaking of protecting players, obviously the news has broke recently that the NFL decided to do away with the rookie symposium in favour of more regional events. As someone who was involved in the rookie symposium and has spoken at length about it, how disappointed are you by this? And is there a danger that the public perception might be it's a few bad apples who ruined it for a majority of players who really did take something from it?
I don't know how much of it, Neil, is potentially a reaction to, that Chris Carter video that got out. I don't know how that works behind the scenes. I'm not privy to that. I can tell you it's a disappointment for me because I really looked forward to that week and I enjoyed being a part of it every year. But that's personally for me. What matters the most is what's best for the rookies. and what's best for the league. The pros of this move are that, they're going to be able to reach more guys, right? The undrafted rookie free agents are going to be able to get, this stuff, this teaching, this learning, which they should. A lot of those guys make teams, even if they don't, they need that information for their life. The cons, I guess, is that, you're going to lose something in terms of quality control, with every team doing it themselves, some scaled down version of it. But I don't know how we'll ever really know what that impact is. I guess we'll look over the next few years. It's an interesting data set, right? It's interesting to see arrests for guys in the previous classes versus arrests for guys in the next few classes. But it's about more than just getting arrested. It's about how you do with your finances. It's about maximizing your potential as NFL players. So I don't know that we'll ever have really good data or information as to, whether or not this is the right move by the NFL, but it's something they certainly felt like was worth trying.
I think there was an article that was trying to link, as you say, the number of NFL players who'd been arrested, and it was trying to link their number of arrests to their low Wonderlic score. That seems to me a particularly dangerous way to try and link it, because didn't Dan Marino or some of the quarterbacks, didn't they famously score very low on the Wonderlic? And I'm pretty certain Dan didn't really have too many problems with the law.
Yeah, that's a generalization. And I'm not surprised by it. In general, in society, there's a higher percentage of crime among lower intelligent, people of lower intelligence, but you can't isolate any one person or make any stereotype on any one person, but there's a lot of factors for that, right? Part of the reason why people turn to crime potentially is because they're not having success. If you're intelligent, you probably have a better chance at least to have success in your life and not have to turn to a life of crime. So I don't know. I don't know who did that study. I don't really know the relevance, right? I don't think that's how teams are making decisions anyway. If they're making decisions about Wonderlic, I think it's more about intelligence, professionalism than it is, hey, that means this guy will, get arrested.
It strikes me as a little bit arbitrary. It might be, it might be just as worthwhile to say, let's link the number of arrests with how fast they ran the 3-cone drill. It's an incredibly random thing to pick on, I think.
Yeah, like I said, I don't put much stock into it. I don't really understand who did the study or what they were trying to come up with, but I don't envision that being a factor in teams' decisions. If they are concerned about a guy's Wonderlic and they don't draft him as high because of it, well, then that's one thing. But I don't think it's because they're concerned that he's going to get arrested, that he's more likely to get arrested. I just don't think that factors into their draft decisions for lower Wonderlic score guys.
And when it comes to the draft, one of my friends has asked me to ask this question of you, as something of an expert. How much time do teams dedicate, planning or simulating, as it were, what they think other teams are going to do in the draft? Do they do mock drafts themselves, trying to work out, the needs and the likelihood that a player will fall to them, or is it a bit more scattershot than that?
They absolutely do that. They absolutely do mock drafts and simulations, especially, the last week or so, because they want to play out different scenarios in their mind of what could potentially happen. So, yeah, the answer is they absolutely, take a look at that to try to get a better sense of who's going to be available. They want to have Plan A, Plan B, Plan C, and Plan D. They want to have it all available.
Because I've recently reread War Room, which is the story, the book about the Patriots and their front office and Thomas Dimitroff and Scott Pioli. And before Thomas Dimitrov made his, the trade for Julio Jones, he rang and spoke to Belichick, he rang and spoke to Pioli. You just think that, obviously because they'd all worked together, there was some degree of confidence. You'd assume that these teams aren't just ringing up random other general managers because they don't want to put too many ideas in their head. All the other general managers just think they're blowing smoke.
Wait, say that again, Neil?
It's one of those things, because we know that the draft is live
No,
season.
I heard what you said. I heard what you said about Belichick and Pioli and Dimitrov, but what was the exact question?
Oh, I mean, when they're doing these simulations, they may speak to other people around the league, but they're not going to be as open as Dimitrov was when he rang Belichick, for example, and said, "I'm going to trade the whole of my draft picks, basically, to get Julio Jones." They may, would they, seek advice from people they know, or would they literally just say, just keep it all in house?
It depends on the team. And if you do call a Belichick like Dimitrov did or Pioli, it's only after you have a lot of trust built up over the years, a lot of trust that gives you the confidence to pull the trigger like that.
Because obviously, as that trade was so big, it's not a question of, hey, who do you fancy taking next? Because we might take them. This was I'm going to trade, I'm basically betting the whole farm. And Belichick's very unlikely to have said, well, I was going to do that. So that's obviously a bit more of a safety net for what Dimitrov did.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in teams and executives having other executives that are confidants. You have to figure out a way at times to be able to pick other guys' brains, but also not put yourself in a disadvantageous position.
Last question for you, Ross. Obviously, I know you're very busy, as I've alluded to at the start. Your latest venture, the big announcement that it was build up, and finally broke to us, tuckheads.com. How's that gone, in your opinion? And, what have you enjoyed most about it in these first few days?
Yeah, it's been awesome. I didn't really have much in terms of expectations. I didn't know how many people would sign up for it and come over to tuckheads.com. But I really wanted a way to sort of continue the conversation from the various podcasts or from my radio show or my columns or whatever. And I wanted the ability to try to get to know my diehard fans, the tuckheads that really have the sickness, like yourself, a little bit better. And that's been my favorite part. It's just been the interaction and getting to know where you guys are from, where you live, see some of the questions you have, and see you guys interacting with each other has really been awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I've spoke to some people on there, very, very interesting. I think one of them is from not too far away from me, and it's good to know that when you are, as big a fan of something as I am, it's good that there are people close that are almost as big a fan as me, because I still remember that we're still something of a minority in this country because it's your sport. We just happen to tag along. It's been great to get to know some more people from this country as well, and some great people from your side of the pond as well.
Yeah, it's been amazing, and I'm consistently impressed by you guys. I think I wrote this in a post recently at tuckheads.com. Consistently impressed by your passion in the UK for American football. I think the NFL realizes that. I'm not sure if they realize it as much as I do, just how diehard you guys are and just how much you care. It is truly, truly impressive.
I think it's quite weird. I mean, my soccer team, as it were, is Sheffield Wednesday, and they basically have spent the last 20 years making me humiliated. But they don't make me angry anymore. Whereas if the Eagles do something stupid, I can throw something, I can swear very loud. They've just managed to get this whole different emotion out of me that an English sport no longer can.
Well, that's awesome. I love to hear that. And I obviously think it's the greatest game ever. I played soccer growing up until I was 12 years old, and then played football. And there's just, if you ever actually have the chance to play it, There's just nothing quite like it. And even watching it, I think it's I'm beyond biased, but I think it's by far the best sport.
Well, Ross, it's been great chatting to you. If you'd just like to tell anyone who's listening where they can find your work and what that work is.
Yeah, well, they're on social media, so am I. Twitter's at Ross Tucker. NFL. Facebook is facebook.com/Ross Tucker NFL. Or you can always just go to my website, rosstucker.com, and see the different podcasts and tuckheads.com and everything.
Thanks very much, Ross.
My pleasure, Neil. Thanks for having me.
Well, that was the brilliant Ross Tucker there. I wasn't there, obviously, but Dutton had the honour and privilege.
Indeed, I did. I think that's the last 2 times we've had Ross that I've had to have. I've done it solo, so I think you're out now.
I think that's it.
He now joins. He joins the Wall of Fame of people who've spoken to us 3 times.
He does, and thank you very much to him. Obviously, you spoke to him, Dutton, about the trade. We haven't mentioned it so far in the show, so I'm interested in your thoughts of what I'm going to forever define as the reverse RG3 trade.
Well, I've seen one thought from Adam Rank, who said, "Finally, Jeff Fish is helping the Titans win." And other people, with someone saying the Rams will evaluate and discuss and debate both quarterbacks, and as I put on Twitter, and then draft Ezekiel Elliott.
There's no way they would draft a running back. It would be they would pick Laramie Tunsil left tackle, surely.
Yeah, I mean, because they need an offensive lineman.
Exactly.
It's weird. If they get their quarterback for the next 10 years, it's a good trade. But at the moment, with a GM who's come from the Patriot school, you'd be hard pressed to think that the Titans aren't the big winners here.
I think at the end of the day, the reason that people think that the Rams are only a quarterback away from being good is the fact that they've had so many picks from Washington over the past few years and managed to get really talented players. I think the Titans have now got 6 picks in the top 76 in the draft, which is pretty good effort. And you'd hope that 4 of them hit with and you're on to a winner. I mean, you need a quarterback. So I understand the concept from the Rams, and in theory you could see that it's a win-win. They're in LA. They need to make a splash. They get a first-round pick. The issue I have is that year that Washington did it, RG3 won the Heisman, and the other quarterback was Andrew Luck. These guys are neither of those 2 players. Now, obviously, an ACL and Adidas campaign and a conversation with Mike Shanahan later, RG3 was nothing. But I struggle. He had the pedigree. Yeah, he had the pedigree, and I struggle to see if these guys have got it. Maybe they have, and maybe we'll be proven wrong. And the question becomes: is which one of the quarterbacks goes to St. Louis, which defines which one will suck in Cleveland?
Well, there's a speculation now that the Eagles had been in negotiations to get the first overall pick. This is, of course, the same draft Twitter Eagles Twitterati who thought that it would have been too much to move up to 2 last year to get Mariota, and now basically begging the Eagles to go up to 1 or 2 to get a quarterback that isn't as good as Marcus Mariota. So yeah, it's a question of, again, the draft now hinges on the Cleveland Browns.
It probably also forces San Francisco's hand, and then puts into question what Denver are going to do in terms of, will they get Colin Kaepernick and that kind of situation? Does that now mean Ryan Fitzpatrick is more on the Denver line? That means the Jets haven't got a quarterback. It does cause a lot of issues for a lot of teams. Mike
Crease is his name for the Denver Post, or Denver ESPN, believes that Denver may have interest in Case Keenum.
Don't I think at that point there's not more really to say on this trade, and we should really get on our final guest of the night on the line, Mr. Matt Waldman, rookie scouting portfolio, a friend of the show, to talk us through his compound of the portfolio, why he hates Penn State quarterbacks, and why he gets more stressed when he goes to get his driving license renewed.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get Matt on the phone. And joining us now on Waxing Lyrical with Mains and Duts, it's the brilliant Matt Waldman from Rookie Scout and Portfolio Creator, Football Guys staff writer, an all-round top bloke. Matt, how are we today?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Not too bad, although I just used top bloke in some kind of 1970s English TV show, and I apologise.
No worries, not at all.
Straight on with the questions, Matt, and my first one really is a question. Obviously, you compile a rookie scouting portfolio, but which is more stressful, completing that or visiting the DMV at lunchtime?
I would say the DMV is a little bit more stressful most of the time, but where I live, it's pretty quick. So I'd actually have to say that completing the RSP was a little more stressful this year than the DMV in this year. So, but that's a change from recent years.
So Matt, in more serious and related to the RSP, how long does that take? Is it almost I've finished last year's, I'm starting this year's?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I will probably start after the draft sometime in mid-May, start watching some prospects and doing the initial film work, and that's going to last throughout the year. I'll probably watch a player a day or a player every other day earlier on in the year. I balance a full-time job doing this, and then I also balance a pretty extensive writing job working with footballguys.com. I've been doing that for a number of years, so I've really had 3 jobs for about the past 10 years, and then maybe 4 if you include my last job with Football Outsider. So I've had a lot of different things to balance, and I found that the bulk of my work would come between November and April, but I would still get as much as I could get done between May and November. This past year and probably this coming year, I'll probably have a little bit more time to space things out. And it'll be just a year-long thing where I'm probably doing at least a prospect every day. And as I do this work, the process tends to get a little bit more efficient every year, the way that I compile things. And if it weren't for some personal emergencies in my life that bound to happen to everybody at some point or another, I probably would have been finished a couple of weeks earlier this year than I had ever been. So I'm pretty optimistic about how this whole process goes and how long it's going to take. And I'm hoping at some point that I'll have more time to do, either add additional things to the RSP that I think people will find interesting, or maybe do a number of different things that I don't know where I'm ready to go with that yet, but I would say either adding a little bit more in terms of content, changing the quality of the content in terms of the presentation, or maybe just putting it out earlier. So, what's
the feedback been like for this year's edition in comparison with other years, Matt?
Yeah, better than ever before. I mean, it's been really nice to see that, the RSP has grown a good bit, and it's the type of feedback that I'm getting now is a little bit more established, because what I found even back in 2006, 2007, when I started doing this, that when someone bought the RSP, they tended to continue to stay a buyer for it every year, that it was just one of those publications that once they saw it, they were hooked. And so I have enough readers now who I think have become very loyal to the product and to the publication and like it, that the word of mouth that I get from advertising on social media has become very strong. And I've had a lot of new people purchase the RSP this year, and they've been very, the initial feedback has been very positive, and the comment, they continue to comment on how the quality of it improves every year in terms of me changing some things that do a little bit more to provide a more in-depth analysis, even to just, the fact that I'm a magazine editor and writer by day, and that's something that I've been doing for the past 10 years at another publication at a university. And, we'll look at, we'll do 2 magazines a year, and they're usually somewhere between 58 and 90 pages in length, and we'll have 8 to 10 people looking at the product, and before we send it to send it to print. And you're even, every publication, even of the highest professional quality, is going to have some level of errors on it. And the fact that the writing has gotten cleaner and the editing has gotten cleaner every year on a publication that I'm doing alone in terms of writing it, and that's been, and I'm doing, I would say, about 5 times the amount of content in 20% of the amount of time that I have at the magazine. I'm pretty proud of the fact that it's as clean as it is.
Dutton, I never want to hear you moan about the amount of work you've got to do for the website you write for ever again.
But I like moaning. Matt, there was a trade today that obviously is going to, you would expect is going to impact the draft quite significantly. I was just interested, what are your thoughts on the trade from the viewpoint of the 2 parties involved?
Well, I think that the Titans end up getting enough picks to really bolster their team. They already have a quarterback that they believe in Marcus Mariota, and he's the type of player, in my opinion, that needs a good amount of surrounding talent to thrive. It's not that he's a bad quarterback. It's just that his style of execution is at its best when he can be more of a manager a manager with a lot of athletic ability in the way that he executes things. He's more of a task-oriented executor of an offense as opposed to someone like Jameis Winston, who's a little bit more of a risk-taker, gunslinger, a player who can put the offense on his back a little bit more, even without great talent surrounding him, and still be able to keep the team competitive. And I think that Mariota's a little different than that. And now the Titans get enough picks that, in the early rounds to be able to, they should, in theory, be able to get enough football players to bolster their defense some more and then help out the offense with a well-placed pick or 2. So that's good for them. And with the Rams, they get their choice of whoever they think their top quarterback on the board is, and they can finally have a player that they feel like they can call a franchise signal caller, and they give him a great running back to play with, so that he's going to have a little bit, he'll have some opportunities just because of the fact that teams have to play the offense more honestly to stop Todd Gurley. And the next thing that they'll need to do is to find, better wide receivers who can be a guy that can grow or develop with whoever they pick a quarterback, and continue to acquire firepower in that offense in the passing game as that quarterback grows and develops. The combination of that really strong defensive front that they have and the strong running game should be able to help them build outward and become a contender within shorter order.
Obviously, those who've read the RSP will probably know the answer to this, but in your opinion, who are the Rams going up to get?
Well, my opinion, there's what I think they should do and what they will do. And there's a lot of mixed, it's kind of split down the middle. There are some people that think that it's Carson Wentz, the signal caller from North Dakota State, who's more of that classic big-bodied, big-armed player who's played in a pro-style offense and kind of fits more of that traditionalist view of what a quarterback is and what a good quarterback should be that you draft. But in terms of his experience level, in terms of what he does reading defenses, in terms of his overall accuracy, I would say that, Jared Goff gets the edge. And Jared Goff is also a little better against pressure in the pocket. He's a little more creative of a player. I think that he's the type of player that can become that franchise caliber quarterback in shorter order than Carson Wentz would. And I also think that he's the only quarterback in this class who really ranks up there with Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota as a player who won't end up going into a shell if he has to start right away. I think that Wentz has a better shot of playing well now that if he ends up with the Rams, because the running game's good enough for him to have some easier opportunities, and he might even be a better short-term fit for that team than Goff would be. But I think Goff is the best quarterback in this class, and I don't think it's that close.
On that question, then Matt, where do Goff and Wentz rank in terms of other quarterbacks you've looked at in the last 3 or 4 years? There's questions that obviously the St. Louis have gone up, but this isn't a great quarterback class, quote unquote. Do you agree with that, or is that something that you say no? These are the best two, and they're the same as kind of every year.
No, I mean I would say that where Goff to me ranks a little above Jameis Winston. And I really liked Jameis Winston last year. So that's a compliment to Goff. I think that, but I would say players like Andrew Luck, Robert Griffin, and Russell Wilson were above Goff. If you were looking in that 2012 class, I would say that a player like, Teddy Bridgewater, Derek Carr would probably rank a little bit below Goff, and would be somewhere, either equal or a little below Marcus Mariota. And then I would put Carson Wentz probably on par with Teddy Bridgewater, but maybe a little bit lower. And somewhere lower than that, somewhere lower than Bridgewater, and about even with David Carr. I wasn't as high on David Carr immediately in terms of his initial development. So I would say that he probably ranks somewhere similar to Carr in that regard. And I think that Carr started to show some signs with some nice talent surrounding him in Oakland that's going to grow. So Goff to me is a borderline franchise prospect. I tend to believe that quarterbacks should not be rushed into the lineup. I think that the change in salary cap gives the teams the opportunity to let them sit a little bit more than they're doing right now. But ownership tends to be impatient and impetuous, and they tend to have that neighbor mentality of, well, my neighbor has this, and this is what worked out, so I must have it too, as opposed to maybe taking a wiser approach and letting their coaches be able to slow develop these guys, and not putting coaches on a 2 or 3 year timeline and firing them because they have some initial struggles and development struggles, and then never get to see these quarterbacks play to fruition. Instead, now they rush them, and when you rush a quarterback, there are so many moving parts to what they have to be able to do and exhibit that they can struggle with. That they get hit too much, they struggle too much. A lot of those components can wear away and be hard to come back. So I think this is a very good quarterback class on the whole, but it would be from the standpoint of if they let quarterbacks develop 2 to 3 years and give them a little time in the lineup, but not force them in as the starter every week. But the NFL doesn't do that anymore.
So on the this is a good quarterback class for our listeners who aren't big college fans, one of the quarterbacks they will have heard of, based on the fact that he worked with Bill O'Brien in Penn State, is Christian Hackenberg. However, in your rookie scout portfolio, you have him at 18. Is that an indictment on him, or is that a compliment to these 17 quarterbacks above him?
I would say it's probably more of an indictment on him than it is a compliment to the quarterbacks above him. Though, I mean, I think that Christian Hackenberg has the physical skills to develop into a competent starting quarterback, and that's what a lot of teams tend to look at players based on their physical skills. If they think the player has a big arm if they think that he's someone that shows some general accuracy throwing the football, and he played at a big school, they feel like they can coach that quarterback and help him become a better player. And if there's one position in the NFL where actually teams can coach up a prospect, it's going to be quarterback. They do provide a lot of assistance in that realm. Other positions, not nearly as much as you would expect. But at quarterback, certainly Hackenberg has a chance to develop, but I have concerns about how he reacts to pressure. There are certain types of pressure that he can move in the pocket, avoid the pressure, and make an accurate throw. There are other plays where he tends to not move exhibit the type of control he should exhibit when pressure arrives, and that causes him to lose sight of what's happening downfield, and it also causes him to throw the ball in a way where he's not accurate. And there are a lot of small flaws that add up with his game that I believe add up to being a bigger indictment as to his early development as a quarterback. Now, that doesn't mean that he can't develop, with some time, but if a team feels like we can turn him around fast and we can turn him the starting lineup right away, I think that he's going to struggle more than what the team may expect, and they could put him in a dangerous situation where it will be hard for him to really grow from that initial experience.
And the last question I have, we'll move away from quarterbacks, is obviously the marquee name, as it were, away from the quarterback position in this draft is Ezekiel Elliott. And then we also have Derek Harvey, who won the Heisman Trophy. So my question is, did Kenneth Dixon just pick the wrong year to come out? And if your team misses out on those first two, how quickly should you get the name Dixon up to Goodell at the podium?
Sure. I would say that the perception on Dixon is probably, and among those in the NFL, is probably going to be lower than folks like myself or people on social media who do a lot of draft analysis. And that may be more because he is a smaller school player. Not that Louisiana Tech is an extremely small program, but it's not a heralded program the size of Alabama or Ohio State. So when I look at a guy like Kenneth Dixon, I think that he's probably a player that will be available in somewhere between the third and fifth round. And I think that teams would be wise to get him if they're in the market for a running back. He's a versatile player. He's certainly someone that I think is a very intelligent football player with a high effort and a nice blend of strength, balance, agility, and skill to catch the football. So he's the type of player, though, that I could foresee a team adding to their lineup as maybe a role player, and then him playing well enough over the next couple of years to earn the starting job. And I think that's how teams are going to look at him. And I don't think he picked the wrong year to come out. I just, I really think that he actually is he's actually exceeding my expectations in terms of how people around me are actually grading him. And if that's the case, it's very possible that him going as the third or fourth or fifth back off the board is, to me, actually is probably a pleasant surprise. Even though I rate him highly, just because I think that, again, the way the NFL looks at players, there's my publication tends to grade players based on what I see on the field, but the NFL also has a very heavy hand when it comes to character, injuries, but also the size of the program that he played at and the kind of production that he had in that program. And Louisiana Tech isn't the kind of program that teams look at and say, you look at his stats and suddenly you compare them equally to the stats that a player like Elliott or Henry would put up.
It sounds a bit, like you say, just from my personal experience, he comes in, he joins the rotation and does enough to eventually win the job. It sounds a bit like Brian Westbrook when he started with the Eagles. I'm not saying he's a similar player, but similar situation.
I think that's a perfect analogy or a perfect parallel to draw with that situation. And then Westbrook was a second round pick, and he was a player that really actually inspired my book. So he was a player who I remember seeing the former president or former GM of the Dallas Cowboys, Gil Brandt, on NFL.com, talk about Westbrook in the terms of that if he were an inch taller and 10 pounds heavier, he would be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft that year. And it made me wonder, well, why is that a big deal? Because really it's, the wheelhouse for running backs in terms of size prototypes, it wasn't that big of a deal. And I think that what it was is that they needed something compensating to it. NFL teams have a very risk management oriented approach to how they pick early players to invest a lot of money in. And Westbrook was a player who was originally a big high school star who the Florida State Seminoles wanted to take, but he hurt his knee just before he was to go to college, and they dropped his scholarship. And then he ended up having a second knee injury playing basketball, and it was just kind of a non-contact injury. And playing in a small school and all those things, it created the bullet points weren't as big for the team to say we feel safe about investing a lot of money in this player that first round money would be, but second round's still good. Kenneth Dixon can be kind of that player.
Final question from us, Matt. You've got one pick of this year's draft. You can pick any player, any position. Who'd you go for?
I would. Oh, goodness gracious. I would say if I'm looking just purely on talent and purely on a type of player that I think that can offer the scheme diversity in terms of playing in any type of scheme and system, who you don't have to take off the field and who can produce at a high level, although he is not at a position that most teams would feel comfortable picking number 1 overall, I would take running back Ezekiel Elliott. I think that it's much like Todd Gurley. Todd Gurley is I think they're equally talented. They're just, the way they express their talent is different. Todd Gurley was, to me, always a force of nature type of guy who the way that he imposes his physical ability on a defense is very impressive from a power speed standpoint, even though he is also a technically sound runner. I'd say Ezekiel Elliott's a little bit more technically sound, not quite as physically imposing as Todd Gurley. So it's a similar talent, but expressed from the opposite angle. And it parallels a lot from 2 backs I remember seeing in 2007 who I graded, and that was Adrian Peterson and Marshawn Lynch. And I actually had Marshawn Lynch rated over Adrian Peterson, even though in my RSP I wrote that Adrian Peterson was as long as he didn't fumble the ball away and he got a little bit more patient, he's likely to be mentioned in the same sentences as players like Eric Dickerson, Earl Campbell, Walter Payton, Emmitt Smith, Jim Brown. But I liked Marshawn Lynch a little bit more early on because of his technical skill. And I think Elliott is that kind of player where technically sound, can play for pretty much any scheme and deliver for you. And that makes it a little harder for defenses when you have a running back who you never have to take off the field and can use in a variety of ways.
Well, Matt, thanks a lot for your time. Really appreciate it. And we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, and it was my pleasure.
Well, that was the brilliant Matt Waldman there, Dutton. And Dutton, where can people get that rookie scouting portfolio?
If you go to mattwaldmanrsp.com, mattwaldmanrsp, all one word, .com, if you log in, make your account, you can buy not just this RSP, you can get previous years. So you can go back, see research notes that, you can basically see players that your team picked, see from the fantasy perspective, you've got quarterbacks, your tight ends, your running backs, your wide receivers, see what Matt thought and see how right he was about them. It's absolutely fantastic. It's a weighty tome, but your family will understand. They had a good run, so
we are getting people to buy a lot of thick NFL draft books over the last couple of weeks, done.
I think what we actually, the ulterior motive here is that we want basically people off the street so that we can drive as God intended us to.
Yeah, not get stuck in hellacious traffic as we usually do.
Mm-hmm.
Especially me, but that's another story for another time. That's due to the day job. Oh, what a terrible tackle. So, Dutton, that is the show. We've spoken about the sad news about James Taylor. We've given you our weird world. Dutton spoke to the man of many hats in the world of NFL media, Mr. Ross Tucker, and we've obviously spoken to Matt Waldman from the rookie scouting portfolio. Heavy NFL the last couple of weeks, done. Heavy NFL as we head directly into the draft.
Well, once the draft wears off, I'd certainly like to get us a few more guests from other realms. Like a few more cricket people. May even ask some soccer people, who knows?
Soccer, love it, Dutton. Well, Dutton, this has been Waxing Lyrical with Main and Dutch. Get used to it.